Hey guys, reviews more, back with another quick tech review, this time on the Rosewill FBM-05, because they love naming their things very boringly, computer case. This is set up for a micro ATX or mini ITX configuration and form factor for the motherboard. So this, as always, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel, or both, if you find this review helpful. This review will include a quick install of a absolute worst case scenario, because the we actually purchased this case to replace an old one on my very first computer build. It's way too large. My wife's taking that computer now, and it's just too big for the desk configuration we have. So we got this itty bitty case for about $22 shipped from Rosewill. They're direct from their eBay store, so free shipping and free returns, which is kind of nice if you don't like what's sent to you. Free returns, no questions asked, which is kind of great. Uses a standard power supply size, and you'll see why that matters in just a moment. It's very light, feels pretty robust. It's obviously not the most expensive material in the world. No glass or tempered glass or even plastic paneling. This is meant to be a no frills, quick to set up kind of deal. And it didn't take too terribly long. The biggest issue with the setup was I have kind of stubby fingers, and I got to get my stubby fingers inside this micro ATX mini ITX configuration area. And because the motherboard I'm using is so old, it's like a AM3 Plus motherboard from at least almost 10 years ago, so it's old, and it doesn't even have things like a USB 3 hookup. So that's what we're dealing with here. And there's the case fans. It's fairly simple. There's one intake, one outtake fan, or one exhaust fan. It's a little bit smaller, so you get some positive air pressure in there overall, but the hookups are fairly minimal on the motherboard. So that's why we're going to be dealing with some major problems. Secondly, I don't know what brand anymore about the power supply you're going to see installed, so just bear with me. The wire management is abysmal. I zip tied it later, which I don't show, unfortunately, but it's pretty bad. The case comes with all the standard things. What's kind of nice, thumb screws in the back, always great when there's thumb screws on a cheap case, because thumb screws are just easier to deal with than anything else that's out there. And you'll look here, it's no frills, nothing special. The inside's not painted black or anything. Sorry about the lighting here, guys. You're just going to see the back panel, very little space for cable management. This is a cable-free back. You could not get a cable back there functionally in a way that's going to close the case, where it's not going to feel like it's smushing up against the backing where the motherboard's mounted. So overall, not the best plan. So this is just the old case versus the new case. This is why we're switching it, because this is the old case. It's a mid-sized case. It's too big for what we're looking for. So we're just going to switch everything down into the smaller case and hope that my wife can get better use out of it. And in hindsight, it looks a lot better and a lot more sleek, and it's not this gigantic big blob on top of a desk. Now here's the quick install, and it does take a little while because, again, stubby fingers trying to get things hooked up properly. And overall, the install was not difficult in and of itself, but if you look up to the top of that screen, you'll see that old style power supply. It's not even a branded power supply. I got the cheapest thing I could find because I was on such a budget when I built this thing. Once everything gets installed and put in, it works great. The only issue is, because this, again, is the absolute worst case scenario in doing a build, I'm taking an old computer, putting into a newer case, which means all the newer case functionality, like the USB 3.0 and that kind of fun stuff, there's no plug-in for that. So there's just extra wires that have to find a place. One thing I would recommend, install the 5.5 and the 3.5 inch drives before you put the motherboard in. Get those installed first, because you're not going to have room to play with depending on the size of your cooling unit. So whatever you're using to cool the CPU might get in the way very, very easily. Plus, if you have tall RAM sticks, same thing could happen. So always put those in first with this case. There's just no room for any kind of wiggle room there if you're using the mechanical drive. There's just not a lot of space. Second, if you look at the top there, you'll see the mess of wires. It doesn't get much better than that as far as this case goes in this install. This is not a modular power supply. It is the cheapest power supply that was probably available 9 years ago. So this thing probably eats power, but this computer's probably got another year at most lifespan on it before I have to start breaking things apart. And really, at that point, it's just rehashing the whole motherboard and just starting over from scratch. And you can see here I'm having issues dealing with, finding where the pin setups are, because it's so tiny and I need my glasses. So that's what we're dealing with at the moment. Yeah, so guys, overall, it's a great case for the money. It looks good. It looks pretty sleek. and the front end looks great. So if you're looking, and it'd be great for like a school setting, or even if you're making your own little smaller PC setup. One thing I recommend, if you're going to use this case, there's going to be airflow issues because the front's pretty well blocked off, so there's airflow's going to be a problem. So if you're looking for a high performance PC here that's going to produce some heat, you're going to have some trouble. Secondly, make sure, again, install the drives first. Don't install the motherboard first. And finally, use a modular power supply on this board, unless you're going to sacrifice the modular power supply for an APU and not worry about doing the whole independent and discrete graphics card thing. This gets tidied up a little bit, but not much based on this image. So after this, I do tidy up some, but not a lot, just because this old power supply was meant to be in a larger case, and I'm just kind of working with what I got. So for what my wife does with it, it's fine, but overall, you got some issues if you want to do anything else major with the actual item. So so those are some key points to be wary of. The install is not terrible. It's just this was the worst case scenario. This was a 10-year-old PC setup trying to be shoved into a relatively new case with the new accoutrements to it and all the new stuff that comes with it, and it was just a bear to get done just getting it all in there. Today, like if you were to use like a Ryzen 2200 series, it would plug right in, you'd be fine. It would be done in 15 minutes and you'd be good to go. But if you're trying to transport things over, or maybe upgrade the case from a really crap, I guess maybe an old style white case for them to make it look better, you might want to avoid this. Okay, so this is a great example of what is the worst case scenario with this case. So this is an old AM3 Plus motherboard with an old stock, unbranded, who the hell knows what it was, power supply, not modular at all, with a ton of extra stuff as if you were going to build a full ATX board on it. So this is the worst case scenario. Additionally, the motherboard is not equipped for USB 3, so you have extra cords from the actual case itself. So this is the worst case scenario right here. And it's not great. I'm not real happy with it, but for what this computer is going to be doing, which is basically going to be a holdover computer for another maybe year at most, and then we're going to be upgrading. This might become as my son's Minecraft computer where we get to play that for a while. We're going to have, I guarantee we're going to have airflow issues in here, but if you look at this graphics card, it's a dinky little 1 gig graphics card. It'll do the basic stuff. Really, it's just because I need something in there to give it some kind of graphics. My wife can do some kind of basic computing. But other than that, this is about as bad as it gets. Cable management is going to be next to nothing in this case. There's very few pass-throughs in the back. So this case, while it's on the budget end, if you're going to budget on this, what I would do is I'd make sure you buy a modular, or at least semi-modular power supply. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with a mess like this, because most of this mess is the power supply cables. So if you get something that comes with a standard set, there's going to be very little room. I tried to tuck away a little bit up here, up there above where the 5.5, where the optical drive is above there, but I almost didn't put the optical drive in, except for the fact that occasionally we do some editing and some watching of videos from the old home movies on there, so we want to make sure we got them. You got space for one more expansion drive right here, just for another 3.5 inch mechanical drive, and space for a random, maybe an optical set in the front. But yeah, again guys, this is like the worst case scenario, which again, if you're looking for something, in my case, we got this case not to actually build a cool, fun computer. It was to make more space, because the other case was gigantic, as you saw earlier in the video. But other than that, I'm satisfied with the case itself, because it's doing what I need to do for as long as it'll do it. But it will not last forever, if I had to guess. And certainly, if you are doing this and you have any heat, so if you have a higher-end graphics card, maybe an older motherboard situation, this is not a way to do it, because it'll get way too hot in there. And I suspect this computer might be a little bit loud as it tries to compensate for the lack of airflow. There is airflow in the front, there is airflow in the back, but the wires are going to make a mess of it. So this is the worst case scenario, guys. I couldn't imagine it being much worse than this, outside of it just being, missing wires or things that shouldn't be there. So thanks for watching, and I'm sorry it looks so ugly, but this is, again, a very niche working progress kind of thing for us as a family. The next thing is this is going to be given to the youngest to the child, and he'll play with it till it dies. And my wife will have a nice new computer, which I'll probably show the build on, which will look a lot better, because it'll be using a Ryzen APU, and it'll use a modular power supply. It'll look a lot prettier, but probably in a very similar case to this. So thanks for watching again.